give it one more, just give it another minute or so, and we'll get cracking. It's nice to start promptly. Give it another minute or so, and we'll get cracking. It's nice to start promptly. Okay, this is exciting. Welcome, everybody. I think we're going to get cracking. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. This is quite an exciting venture for us. We've not done a Zoom Hustings before, and I don't believe there's many of them around for this election. Funded projects supporting grassroots community activities and initiatives. Community projects, community activities and events. You can contact myself or Georgia directly. What we'll do, we'll post our contact details in the chat facility. Okay. I'm going to hand over briefly to Gwen, and then I'll say a bit more about how we're going to run the session. So it's over to you, Gwen.
Thanks, Ben. Diolch, Ben. Just cyfle I groeso pawb yn Gymraeg, ac hefyd I gliro, os gynnon ni ddim cyfieithu ar y pryd, ond gan bod pobl yn cyfrannu trwy'r chat, os di rhywun eisiau sgwennu yn y Gymraeg, dwi'n hapus I gyfieithu. Dyna ni am rwan, handio nôl I Ben. Over to you, Ben.
Okay, thanks, Gwen. So, we invited all 8 of the candidates for the Clwyd West constituency to attend this evening, and we've got 6 of them with us. So I'm going to introduce them all, and if you could give everyone a wave. We've got their party affiliation next to their name as well, which should also help. So, sitting member Darren Miller. There you go. Joshua Hurst for Welsh Labour. Ellen Walker-Jones applied. Thanks, Ellen. David Wilkins. There's David from Welsh Liberal Democrats. Claire Eno. There's Claire from Reform UK. And Tridian Hughes from GLAD, the Welsh. Housekeeping points for everyone who's attending. Apart from the candidate, to make things run smoothly and to minimise interference and any breakdown of connections, we've asked everyone to be muted and have videos off. The session is being recorded, just so that you know that, and so it will be shared, no doubt, on other forums. We'll probably be putting it on our Facebook forum. Please feel free to use the chat function if you've got comments you want to make or supplementary questions you might want to ask. I can't guarantee that we'll be referring to those because of the way the constraints of time and so on. There's also a reactions button if you want to give a thumbs up or a thumb. I think you can do a thumbs down as well. I think you can heckle virtually on these systems. So, okay, so we'll get to the business now. What I'm going to do initially is to ask each of the candidates to make an opening statement of just 2 minutes to say if they are successful in this election, what would be their approach and their contribution to building stronger communities in Wales. Okay. Then we'll get into 40 minutes or so of questions being submitted from local residents, and there'll be a closing statement then from the candidates. So without further ado, can I ask Darren to go first?
Thank you very much indeed, Vin, and it's great to see so many people on this particular call, and it's nice also to actually see the candidates, albeit virtually, that are taking part in this election. You know, it's been an absolute thrill for me and an honour to represent the Clwyd West constituency for the past 14 years. I'm someone who, of course, was brought up in Towing, just down the road from Colwyn Bay, went to school in Abergele, went to college in Rosehill, worked down in Ruthin for a time as an accountant. And in fact, immediately before getting elected to the Senedd, I was actually working in the charity sector. So I know how hard it can be sometimes when you're working from one project to the next. And I just want to say this, you know, that in terms of priorities for the community sector, if I was in the community sector, I'd be looking for continuity of funding rather than going from feast to famine with your funding. I think we need to make sure that we've got capacity building in different places where perhaps communities need to be developed more in terms of the teams that they can get, where you can bring people together with the right skill set so that they can be self-sustaining. And the other priority I think that we need from the next Welsh Government is further investment in the community facilities programme, which I think is an excellent programme, to be fair to the Welsh Government. I've seen it being used very effectively in communities across Clwyd West in the past in order to make sure that community assets can be developed. And I very much hope that will be extended in the future. We do, however, need to change the law so that when community services or facilities are under pressure and facing closure, as we've got the situation, for example, in Colwyn Bay at the moment with the library, that the local community can step in to run those facilities. And that's not always straightforward. So I'm going to zip up there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. And thanks for keeping to time. Well done. Okay.
Gwen gave me the zip.
I know. Thanks, Gwen.
The wave is working.
Hey, system's working. Okay, Joshua.
Okay. Absolutely, thank you, Vin. So, Colwyn Bay is a genuinely beautiful place to call home, and it's a town which thrives on community spirit. Now, I live just a short 20-minute walk from the heart of Colwyn Bay, which is very fortunate because I went to school there for 7 years, and I played for a variety of football clubs for over 10 years, meaning I've used pretty much every sporting facility in the Glyn ward. The investment in Colwyn Bay over the last 10 years or so has been phenomenal, whether that's been through the investment on the coast, the 100 million put into sea defences, whether that's with the new council buildings or the other sporting events in the park areas. However, this investment is far from the full picture. In a series of inquiries conducted by the Glyn Ward Investment Local Steering Group, Citizens Advice, and the End Child Poverty Campaign, it was found that child poverty in Colwyn Bay is far higher than the Welsh average. More than 1/3 of children are estimated to be living in poverty. Now, I received free school meals all throughout school, so once upon a time I would have been aggregated into those statistics. Crime rates are also significantly higher than the average in Conwy and Glyndwr. So when looking through the data entries and the sort of funding that's in Clwyd West, it's clear that there's a clear correlation between the Conservative government austerities and the cuts to local government and deprivation that we see emanating from Westminster. The Welsh Labour government approach to community is not about austerity, and it's not just about sort of tackling local responses to emerging issues. It's the broader effort to resolve issues in the community before they emerge. We can achieve community cohesion, engagement and flourishing through improving services, yes, but we need to ensure we have a successful turning there. Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua.
Sorry, I just had a message in the chat that my audio is poor. Can everybody hear me okay?
It was breaking up a little bit, to be honest with Joshua.
No worries.
Okay. Thank you for that. Ellen, you okay to come next?
Diolch. Noswaith dda, good evening. Well, can I congratulate you first of all on organising this event? What a great way of facilitating community participation. Absolutely excellent. Nongfachiadau mawr. Now, my name is Ellen Walker-Jones, and it's my privilege to stand, well, I'm not actually standing, but to be present here with you, even though it's virtual in Colwyn Bay. And I believe that I and my team would serve the people of Clwyd West and the people of Colwyn Bay best So please vote for Ellie Walker-Jones, Plaid Cymru on May the 6th. So why am I saying this? Plaid Cymru stands for a nation of equals and an equal mission. A Wales that is proud and equal to the other nations in the world, and a Wales where everyone in our communities are respected, valued for who they are, and treated as equal. And that goes for Colwyn Bay too. We've always been a party where decisions are made at grassroots level. We believe that decisions should be made by the people who are affected by those decisions. And our policies are about empowering communities, bringing people together, having a can-do attitude. I'm so proud of that. Now we're coming through this pandemic, and I know it's had a devastating effect on families and communities, loss of health, lives and jobs, but it's also shown what people can do when they come together, communities supporting each other, supporting the most vulnerable in our society with food, parcels, prescriptions, friendship and everything else. Oh, okay. I'll very quickly just say, I know you have the hugest respect for Abdul, your councillor here in Glasgow, and I hope to tell you more about what Clyde could do for Colwyn Bay if you vote for us. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thanks very much, Ellen. We move on. We just keep things moving as quick as we can because we know there's a lot of contributions to get through. David, you have to go next.
Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. I'm a teacher, so I work in the community in Colwyn Bay, and I see a broad spectrum of the society. I see those who have and those who have not. I see the impact of making free school meals available over holidays and half terms. I see the impact of changing the figures so that less students are at free school meals. I see how this impacts children at their families broader than that. I see what happens when there isn't enough access to child mental health. I see all of this and tackle it. I see the stress that the education workforce goes through and how that is passed on as a result of cuts to budgets by councils because of the settlement coming through from Westminster. I see the troubles that we have. I do my best to support local food banks. I do my best to support the community can. But what we need is elected representatives who actually stand up for us, not sit and claim on the gravy train or debate complicated constitutional issues, try and pull power away to Westminster or further centralise it in Cardiff. What we need is a community-focused approach to this, exactly like the work that you guys do, the amazing work that BCT does in terms of looking for community-based projects. I'm immensely proud of the independent shops, retailers and projects going on in North Wales. And I do think we need, if we are to put recovery first, if we're going to manage to actually come through COVID successfully, and it's been awful for so many people, if we are going to get a successful recovery, we need a locally produced, environmentally friendly recovery that meets the needs of Colwyn Bay. And who better than the residents of Colwyn Bay and Rose and Abergele? It's everyone, isn't it? Who knows better than those people who put at the heart of this recovery?
Thank you, David. Claire, you're up next. So, okay. You're on mute.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Dr. Claire Eno, and I'm your Reform UK candidate for Clwyd West. I've lived and worked in North Wales 20 years. I love the area, and I'm really glad to be able to speak to you now in your hustings on building strong communities in Wales. Now, Reform UK believe that the people of Wales should be in charge of elected politicians and not the other way around. So we fully support initiatives like the Building Communities Trust, and we believe in keeping decisions close as possible to the people that actually need to implement and live with those decisions. So to rebuild communities in Wales after COVID in particular, we consider there are several strands to pursue. There's economic, political, social, educational, infrastructure and health. we can see the state of the high streets, so we really need to rebuild them, and businesses, and essentially to regenerate revenue, jobs, and community well-being. And indeed, in Reform UK, we have a bold economic plan, which you can look at to look at that. And so that includes freezing council tax, scrapping business rates in Wales by creating internet sales tax and various other things. So we will actively seek to devolve some powers from Welsh Government to local authorities, thus bringing them closer to the people, making more affordable housing, encouraging people to stay and live in the community, allowing parents to take children on holiday if they want to sort of enrich their educational experience. And we believe that 15 and 16-year-olds should be taught how to manage their money.
Sorry, Claire, to cut in. I'm afraid that's the 2 minutes up.
Okay. In that case, yes, I'll leave it there, and I'll tell you some more later. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was brutal, Gwen. It was.
I felt quite mean.
Okay, Ryddion, you're next. Thanks.
Okay then, well, first things first, let me just thank you all for inviting me here. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be able to speak to you on behalf of WAD, the Welsh Independence Party. So, community is very important, isn't it? I think during these troubled times, that's the only thing that we, have been able to keep together, and that is communities. So, give you a little bit of background about myself. As a young man, I used to do a lot of boxing, visited Colwyn Bay a lot, boxed a lot in the Dyffryn Clwyd boxing club, and also working in the security industry. I was exposed to a lot of different kind of elements, people, in job centres and all that. Now, in order for us to be able to solve the issues that Colwyn Bay faces, we need to take a different approach, not necessarily relying solely of funding, although it is good. I want to talk about maybe trying to encourage people, local people in Colwyn Bay, to become entrepreneurial and to become enhanced in their thinking. So what do I mean by that? Being in lockdown, COVID-19, we have now seen a large increase in usages of the internet. So what I would like to do is encourage people to look at. Oh, sorry.
That's actually 30 seconds, I think.
Wow, sorry.
30 seconds left. Sorry.
Sorry, am I finished?
30 seconds you've got, Ryddion.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So yes, entrepreneurship, and also we need to look at the housing situation. We have a lot of holiday homes, second homes in Wales, and I would like to talk about the possibilities of making it easier for people to buy their own property in their local communities, so communities can remain flourishing.
Okay, thanks, Ryddion, and thanks all of you.
Sorry about that.
We're going to move on quickly, and I'd like you all in turn to get I'll tell you what the question is now so that you can prepare yourself. Can you give an example of a community-led project that you've taken part in, supported, or been inspired by? And this is a question from Georgia, who is the Community Arts Development Officer for Together for Colwyn Bay. So, an example of a community-led project that you've taken part in, supported, or been inspired by. Do you want to? We'll change the order a little bit now. Joshua, do you want to go first on this?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. So in 2019, I was elected the president of a society in Cardiff called Help for Homeless. It was a student-led society, an organisation where we, the students, sought to help alleviate homelessness in Cardiff. Now, we didn't have a lot of money, didn't have any external funding. We had to be really creative with the kind of strategies that we employed to alleviate homelessness. We got in touch with the Optometry Society to make sure all the homeless people get eye tests. We got in touch with the dental students to make sure all the homeless people were given dental tests. And we got in touch with the law students, which was myself, to ensure that all the homeless population in Cardiff had access to pro bono legal access, so they could secure any contracts they needed for employment, so that they could secure the necessary paperwork to get a credit card. It was a wonderful project. I was only president for a year, but I saw firsthand how a small team of people, without that much money and that much influence, can really make a strong difference in society and really get into the nitty-gritty of what builds communities and what builds people and organisations up. It was really, really effective, and I would like to, moving forward, as a prospective candidate for Clwyd West, to develop a lot of the skills that I learned in that to help other organisations and communities build up with other organisations like student groups and teaching groups to ensure that we can alleviate some of the horrible burdens that we see in society.
Thanks, Joshua. David, do you want to go next?
Thank you very much. Some of you might know that I grew up here in North Wales, but I spent time living in England, working in South Yorkshire. And I've seen out there similar communities to Wrexham, for example, where huge deprivation. And I was very heavily involved in a sports club out there, so the rowing club on the River Don in Doncaster. And we took National Lottery funding, and we used it to Sport England funding, and we used it to build a rowing club, which has sent athletes off to row at some of the best rowing clubs in the world and off to universities. And it started not simply as a sports facility for those who are most able, but actually it was an engagement program for disaffected youngsters in schools. So we employed community coaches, went in and helped some of these youngsters turn their lives around. And some of the students that I was involved with as a rowing coach and as one of the senior members of the club, I worked with individuals who went on to university, who were on the verge of dropping out of school. And community projects like that and the sensible use of funding is through things like the National Lottery. And I know that some of the funding we're discussing for the BCP projects this evening comes from National Lottery, I believe. Yeah. Using that money well can transform lives and turn people who would potentially turn into, at worst, a burden on society or a mental health burden, turn them into productive members of society. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of. It's really inspirational to see them. They still get in touch every now and again with my wife and I, who was also involved. They talk to us still about that shared experience we had, and it was a pleasure with those guys and to work with them. It's something I've really enjoyed.
Thank you, David. Darren, we move to you, please.
Thanks, Vin. I've been involved in a number of community projects over the years, but probably the first one I got involved with was through a local church that I attend in Towyn on Gorse Road. And we had a project where we wanted to extend our building in order to enable more things to take place in it, because we realised that the community facilities in the local area were few and far between. And because of my background in accountancy, I had to throw the bid together with a small team in order to see if we could get the funding in. We managed to get some grants from REN, as it was then, which gave some money because we were near a landfill site, and from the Community Facilities and Activities Programme, which of course is a Welsh Government programme. And as a result of that, there's a great building now in Towyn, which is well used by mum and tots groups, play groups, youth groups, local keep fit classes, Slimming World, which I need to attend, I think, at the moment, and all sorts of other things which take place there. And so it was a privilege to take part in that. I think as well, though, there are many other projects around the constituency that I've been proud to support. Just sometimes sending a letter of support and encouraging people to go that extra mile with their projects makes a real difference. And perhaps the most exciting project that I've seen over the years has been the Raven Inn in Llanarmon, which was a pub which was the heart and soul of the local community. It was closed. It was due to become a private dwelling, but the local community took it over, re-established it as a pub. It became such a hub that the local post office moved in there. They now own the local community shop. And it's just from a few, as Joshua was just saying, just from a small core of people that got their act together and committed themselves to the local community, and they make a real difference. And if you want to go somewhere, now that hospitality is opened back up for outdoor hospitality, get yourself down to the Raven Inn. You will be gobsmacked by the amazing people that are there.
Great, thank you very much, Darren. Claire, do you want to come in? Claire's on mute. You okay? Okay.
Sorry about that. I've worked all my life in the environment and worked with many groups of people. You know, I've brought fishermen together and all sorts of things like that. But in terms of a community project, my mind went back to while we were in lockdown in COVID. And because I'm interested in the environment and I've given advice on alien species which you know sort of can invade and take over our natural areas. When I was walking in the local area, I noticed some Himalayan balsam, which had basically taken over a local couple of fields, which was owned by a widow. She had some sheep in there, and the sheep were struggling to find to find sufficient area to sort of enjoy and to eat grass. And so I asked her whether she'd like me to try and organise a group of people to help address this. And she sounded optimistic about the idea of it, but sort of pessimistic about but people say they'll help and they never do. So I sort of went round and I galvanised all the people in the locality to come out. So I contacted a group that involved with sort of helping local toads to get across the road. And effectively, we had several sessions of going out and pulling out all this Himalayan balsam and getting rid of it. I got in touch with all sorts of people to sort of get the best guidance. And the number of people, because they were locked in their homes, who came out and said how much they enjoyed this outdoor sort of social interaction, because we were effectively able to, socially distance. And by the end of it, we completely cleared the fields. And then we noticed there was some in the sort of local castle grounds. So we went in, and again, that was an elderly resident, and he was delighted because we were able to clear that ground. And I just felt so elated that during a time when people had been so sort of starved of interaction, that we actually came together as a group of sort of extended neighbours and really worked hard to do a service project which did some good for the environment as well.
That's great. Thanks, Claire. We're going to move on to Fridian, please.
So, as a young man, I participated a lot in boxing, and I was honoured and privileged to be able to box for Wales, but also to travel around the UK and Europe boxing. So, I found sports to be, a good avenue to go into, and there was a period where people were encouraging youngsters to take more sports activity rather than staying at home playing the video games and all that. So, my idea would be to get people focused, get youngsters focused, and people focused in in developing their community areas, and also feeling good about themselves. The same thing can be said again about starting up their own businesses and entrepreneurship. I believe for better communities, people need to have a goal. People need to be focused on something, and I found again participating in sports, it cleanses the mental mind, and not only a healthy sleep, but you've got a healthy mind as well, and that can also be then transformed into other elements or other parts of the community. I believe if we can create football clubs, rugby clubs, tennis clubs, we should be able to also create business clubs, technology clubs, where people can pull in resources together and figure out ways of making the community a whole.
Great, thanks all of you for that. Gosh, it's 6:30. So what I'm going to do is jump straight to a very local hot issue. This question, several people have raised the question of the proposals around Colwyn Bay Library. and I'm going to use the wording of the question from Kathy Cassidy, who's a local resident and an author, and I believe she's here this evening as well. The question is, the council plan to downsize Colwyn Bay Library from its current historic Carnegie building to a small area within the Clwyd Council building. This will leave Colwyn Bay with another empty Victorian building and is likely to impact the library service. Can any candidate pledge to stand up for the library and argue for it to be fully funded and remain in its current home? Okay. Who wants to take that first?
Vin, sorry, just to cut across, a couple of people just noted in the chat that Ellen didn't have a chance to answer that last question.
That's my fault completely. I beg your pardon. I just realised that. Sorry, it probably wasn't a good idea to mix the order up. Ellen, I beg your pardon. I do apologise.
It's okay, Vin, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to tell you. I've also had the privilege of participating in a lot of community initiatives over the past, well, there we are, I'm showing my age now, and as a county councillor, and it's a joy, isn't it, when you're working with people. But I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about what you have here in Colwyn Bay. I was privileged to get to meet the St. Joseph's Food Bank recently, and I was just bowled over about as to how amazing they were, and the volunteers giving their time and reaching out to people who are vulnerable. And I could talk about what we do as well, but I'm not going to because I know you're short for time. Another time. I'll tell you about us in another time. Thanks. Diolch.
Thanks, and I do apologise for that. That's taught me a lesson. I'm not going to mix up the order and try and be clever. I'm going to revert to type. So we'll come back to the library question just to recap. Can any candidate pledge to stand up for the library and argue for it to be fully funded and remain in its current home? We'll go to Darren first, please.
Absolutely. I've been a regular user of that library for my surgeries for the past 14 years, and every time I go in, it's packed. It's got people downstairs reading, it's got people upstairs on the computer bank enjoying browsing the web. It's got people very often in classes, adult learning classes in some of the rooms as well when I go in there. So I know what a hub of activity the library actually is. And it's more than that because it's actually a very important old historic building for the town. It's an important part of the heritage of Colwyn Bay. And that's why, when I heard about these proposals, I wrote straight away to the Chief Executive of Conway County Borough Council, and I made it clear that the council must listen to the local views of residents in the town about the future of that building. We need to make sure that we've got quality library services that people can access. That's got parking around for members of the public to be able to use. It's very well loved. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Invest in it. Make sure that it's got a long-term future. That's my message to the local authority.
Thank you. Joshua.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody's going to come on this call and say that the library ought to be scrapped, and for me it isn't even a debate. I'm slightly confused with Darren Miller's approach there because it was a Conservative council which has decided to put this proposal through. And the process of austerity which we've seen in 2010 from the Conservatives is a relentless attack on our public services. So as well as proposing to ensure that we have the funding for this library, I would like to see our Conservative incumbent Senedd member also commit to ensure that no public services are cut under his watch.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to have to move to give everyone a fair chance to reply. But if you want to come back on it on anything, either the candidates, please use the chat function as well, so that we can all see responses. Unfortunately, because there's 6 of you, I'm going to have to move on. Ellen, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I don't think any of us are going to disagree with that. I think we're all in full support of keeping community services and remembering that things like libraries, they're such a precious resource. And as Joshua was saying, in these days of harsh, austere cuts to public services, local authority services, where everything is about what we have to do, what we statutory duties like childcare and mental health and schools. We forget that actually things like libraries have a huge effect on people's mental health, and we need to be supporting them. So yes, let's all ensure that we pledge to support the Colwyn Bay Library in its beautiful current building, rather than moving it to, somewhere else where it doesn't need to be. Thanks. Diolch.
One consideration for candidates might be that what would the role at the moment, the council library service is under the kind of management, if you like, of the local authority. But what role could there be for the Welsh Government to support the library service? We're going to move on then to David.
I think I'm going to be slightly controversial, very controversial perhaps. What are we most upset about here? Are we upset about the movement of the library, or are we upset about the loss of services? And we need to be really careful, because this is a tip of an iceberg. If we lose any of those vital services, my children used to attend the reading group, the mothers and toddlers group that was there. I use it myself as a library borrower. I know students who sit in there after school and work. Are we worried about losing the services, or are we more concerned about the building? Because if it's services, we need to get on our high horse a little bit more. We need to look at all of the other small community libraries that have been closed. We need to look at things like midwifery services that are being rolled back. We need to look at all of the public spaces, the reduction in funding for church halls and other community hubs. It's not simply about the closure of a building here. It's actually the systematic rolling back of services in Conwy Council, and I will pledge to put communities first, so that people can access what they need within 20 minutes walk, 15 minutes walk, and accessible by public transport. It's services we have to protect in the most suitable buildings. And maybe we have to make some tough choices about what those buildings are in order to preserve every level of service we possibly can.
Thanks, David. I think that the conversations that we've had in Together for Colwyn Bay, we had a stall at the Artisans market last week, and the sentiment is that there is a huge affection for the current building, and that's one of the reasons that that people are quite concerned about the location of the library, and also whether or not the services would be compromised in that building. I might dwell on this subject a little bit longer than we planned initially, because I think it is such a local hot potato. I'll go to Claire and Vivian, and then I do want to come back to the challenge, the point that Joshua made, and ask Darren to come back if that's okay. So we'll go to Claire first then.
Thank you. As you say, Vin, people have a great affection for this beautiful old Carnegie building, and really it's their decision as to if they want to continue going to the library there. And so, we would consult very much just to ensure that that's what the people want. And the people of Colwyn Bay, they deserve to make these decisions and to have a part in it. And in terms of providing the funds, maybe to refurbish the building, then obviously the council consider there's room within Clwyd for more. And it's cost a huge amount to Clwyd, and it will continue to cost a huge amount. It's about 58 million over the 40 years. And so really we need to be using Clwyd in a better way. And with all the council workers being furloughed at the moment and working from home, many of them may want to stay at home. And so, you might find that there's an opportunity there to maybe build a business hub within Clwyd and to actually rejuvenate the economy in that case, and therefore generate the funds necessary to refurbish the library, and even a community space within the vicinity of both, that I believe the people would really enjoy within Colwyn Bay.
Thanks, Claire. Video.
Of course, I have to agree to a degree what David Wilkins said. Are we concerned about a historical building, or are we concerned about services? Now, I myself also, I like history, and I understand how these things can be attached to peoples and communities. They become like somewhat of a symbol of a community. So what I would look to is, yes, providing support and funding, but we have to ask ourselves, are there any ways that we could improve the service? Maybe some refurbishment and, knowledge is power, and I wouldn't want to see such a building being closed because, again, people don't have access. Not everybody have access to Wi-Fi or to books. So it is something I think that as a community, Colwyn Bay would have to really discuss and talk about and ask ourselves, are we really concerned about a historical building, or is it the services that it provides?
Thanks, Lydia. I think the answer is both. Looking at the chat comments, I'm going to give Darren the opportunity to come back in as a sitting member and respond to Joshua's point. Okay.
Thanks very much, Vin. I just wanted to mention 2 points, really. First of all, back in 2010, the then Labour Council proposed closing a number of libraries across Clwyd West, including in Colwyn Bay and Cerrig-y-Drudion. And I worked very hard with the local communities there to safeguard their library services, and we were successful in being able to do so. Of course, at that time, it was not a Conservative administration, and it's not even a Conservative administration now, Joshua. It's a coalition arrangement. The Conservatives do not have overall control of the council. The second point I'd like to make is that, of course, local authorities in North Wales, as is the case everywhere else in the country, get their funding from the Welsh Labour government. And consistently, for the past 14 years while I've been a member of the Senedd, on average, the increases to North Wales local authorities in terms of budgets for funding all of our public services from the Welsh Government are consistently lower than the local authority settlements in South Wales. And that's why you don't hear about the closure of many libraries in places like Cardiff, Swansea and Newport, where the budgets seem to go up and up and up without any problems. We have an imbalance in terms of the investment that comes into this country across Wales from the Welsh Labour government. And unfortunately, North Wales has never had a fair deal, in my view. It's very clear to see that when you look at the sums. Check it for yourself, Vin. Check it anybody else who's watching. You look at those average local authority settlements, North Wales always gets worse ones than the South.
Thank you. Joshua, do you want to come back on any of those points before we move on?
Yes, I absolutely do. The council is controlled by the Conservatives, as well as Darren Miller knows. And the budget that's allocated to Wales for funding in both North and South Wales is allocated by a Conservative government. Darren made the point that we don't see libraries getting cut in Cardiff or Swansea. Yes, we do. There has been a systemic approach to austerity within Wales, led by the Conservative government in Westminster, which has cut services left, right and centre. I was a student there for 4 years. I saw the buses get cut. I'm not denying the North divide, but there is cuts across the board. And that's what I want to see an end of. It's okay, say, libraries were campaigned for in 2010, but we've had 11 years of cuts since then. We've seen schools roll back. We've seen classrooms with sizes of 35 or 40, and we don't have a Senedd member who is willing to commit and say they will not stand against the Conservative cuts that have emanated from West.
Can I just make this further point, Vin? Really important. For every pound that's spent on a library service per capita in England, Wales receives £1.20 to spend here. I think that's a pretty good deal from the UK Conservative government for Wales. And there's absolutely no reason why we should be seeing libraries closed in Wales. The fact of the matter is that the money's divided up. The slices of the pie that come to North Wales are smaller than those slices of the pie that go to those other local authorities in South Wales. As I say, it's not my view. These are facts. People can check them for themselves.
I've got one final question if I can, Ben.
You have to be very, very quick.
I will. Darren, do you believe that the money Wales receives from the Conservative government is sufficient?
I believe that the money that Wales receives is fair given the Barnett formula. We have a Barnett financial formula which, in addition to the fiscal framework, which was agreed by the Labour government with the Conservative government, gives Wales £1.20 to spend for every pound spent on a devolved service in England. That's over and above the needs in terms of the formulas that have been calculated in the past by independent researchers, as Joshua and others on this call will well know. So for every pound spent on our health service, Wales gets £1.20 to spend on a patient here. For every pound that's spent in a school in England, Wales has £1.20 to spend on a pupil here in Wales. That's a pretty good deal.
Okay.
Could I just one quick and then like 2 seconds? The truth of the matter is Wales has been governed by a British administration which has no interest in Wales. They have parties that have their bases in England. And the truth of the matter is the needs and aspirations of Wales are not interested. It's not in their, vocabulary, So if we had a Welsh administration, politicians who really had more loyalty to Wales rather than Westminster, it would be better, in my opinion.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to leave the last very quick word to Ellen, and then we've probably got time for one more question. Ellen.
Here we are again, the Tories and the Labour Party quibbling about what's best for Wales. Can I make the point that both the Tories in Westminster and the Welsh Labour government are not serving the people of Wales, not serving the people of North Wales, and the only real answer for the people of Wales is independence. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on, but I just want to bring this back to the local issue, if I can, and just remind everybody that the local authority will be conducting a public consultation, and I think there's an opportunity to have your voices heard and perhaps to contribute to the suggestions for alternatives to the proposals, including I think a couple of people have raised the notion that the current facility could be used to house community-led initiatives as an option. And so there will be an opportunity and will be part of that debate, I'm sure. So thanks for the candidates for that. I'm going to hand over to Gwen. This is probably going to be the last question of the evening. It's gone very quickly. Gwen, you've got a question.
I have. So the next question is, Colwyn Bay, like many town centres around Wales, has been adversely affected by the crisis in retail, especially during the pandemic, with business closures and shops often owned by absentee landlords standing empty. What proposals do you have to bring empty buildings back into use for the benefit of local communities? And Ben, do you want to take over now? Or
yeah, that's fine. I'll stick to the order.
The order that you've got.
So it's Darren again. I can remind everybody it is 10 to 7, so we'll have to be quite quick.
So we've made a bold commitment in our manifesto, and that is to establish a £250 million COVID Towns Fund. That would be focused largely on seaside and market towns, which have taken the brunt of the hit of the COVID pandemic and the downturn that's been caused by that. It's always horrible to see shops empty on our high streets, but one of the things that this COVID Community Towns Fund would do is it would actually make some areas in our town centres business rate free, and that hopefully will help to make more businesses viable so that they can set up shop. In addition to that, of course, it will make those businesses that are already existing, it would give them more money in their pockets, so perhaps they could employ more people and help to really ramp their businesses up. I think it's a great shame that here in Wales we've got the worst business rates regime of any of the UK nations. Businesses are taxed more through business rates in Wales than any other part of the United Kingdom. And in addition to that, of course, it should come to us as no surprise that because of these high rates of business rates, we have a situation where we've got the highest vacancy rate on our high streets in the whole of the UK. I think it's something like 10 out of the top 20 towns in terms of empty voids on the high street are actually in Wales. And I think it's a great tragedy. And that's why we need this community towns fund, this COVID towns fund, to help those high streets bounce back. And I think that local communities as well need to be able to get involved in terms of how some of the other money in that fund is spent. But £250 million is a huge sum, well beyond anything that's been committed by any of the other political parties, and it would make a real difference to towns like Colwyn Bay.
Thank you, Darren. And please contribute to the online the chat comments. There's some good virtual heckling going on, which is nice to see. And I'm going to move on to Joshua for the next.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Vin. So I think we're all going to agree that the state of our high streets is pretty deplorable, and it's only been further exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic. I think what we need to do is sort of reimagine the way the high street will operate in the future. It isn't purely about lowering the business rates for shops to operate. It's to reimagine how the shops actually constitute on the high street. It's about opening up those spaces for other services, for sports, for arts, for things that can manifest physically on the high street, whilst other sort of dependencies like retail and food operate outside the traditional high street as we see. What's brilliant about the Labour manifesto, if you read page 59, we're opting to give a lot of funding and initiatives and control back to local communities to decide how they run their high streets and how they run with local government organisations and authorities to construct the high streets that they want to see. We give control to local authorities over pedestrianisation and sort of physically manifesting structure in societies they want to see. We were pledging 110 million to the High Street Development Fund and the building of town centres, but I think it's more about sort of figures, facts and numbers. It's about really sort of thinking about how a high street can operate in the future. There's no point just trying to fix a dead model, and I think with the way retail and the way a lot of sales-oriented shops are going to go, we're not going to see them on the high street. So we need to make sure that our high streets and towns are sort of reimagined for the future, so to speak.
Okay, thanks, Joshua. I think one of the key concerns of people locally is that when shops are empty and they lie idle and there's very little control over absentee landlords, and that is a major concern locally. Okay, so Ellen, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you for that. I think the pandemic has speeded up a process that was already happening already, and our town centres are unfortunately looking a bit dismal. But it doesn't have to be like that. And actually, when you go to the middle of Colwyn Bay, the centre of Colwyn Bay on market day, it's not dismal at all. It's full of these radiant, successful, fantastic, creative businesses, local businesses, small businesses. And we know that from the pandemic, the lockdown, that all these chain stores are closing, but actually local businesses, people have been far more likely to support local businesses. And I think, I hate to agree with Joshua, but yes, reimagination is such a good word. It's this can-do attitude. We can reimagine our local town centres. You've got that beautiful seafront promenade in Colwyn Bay, and the link between, the town centre and that promenade. We need to make most of that and bring people into the town centre and out again to enjoy the views. It's about reimagining the way we use town centres for leisure purposes, residential services, so that people enjoy being in that area. And Clyde have got policies around reducing the business rates and also local procurement in order to strengthen local businesses. I better stop there. Diolch.
Thanks, Ellen. David.
Thank you. Let's scrap business rates. Let's level the playing field with these online giants. Scrap them, level it up. Let's boost active transport. Let's boost public transport, because people who come into town on foot, come into town on the bus or the train, are more likely to use the services the high street has to offer. A well-designed transport and infrastructure, including places that you can park your car and then walk into town, that's going to help reinvigorate our high street. And one of the biggest things that we're not talking about here is there's been a systematic cutting. There's been below inflation wage rises for so long. Almost everyone is now being underpaid what they were 5 years ago. And if we want to save the high street, we need money in the pockets of people so they can spend it in our high streets. We can do all of the reimagining we want, but unless people have the cash, they can't spend it and our high streets will die. So let's look again at the really fundamental ideas here, which is the high street the provider we need? Can we get to it? And can then people afford to use it? It shouldn't just be gentrified with posh cafes and things. There's a role for everything in the high street to suit everyone's pockets, but we've got to put something in those pockets.
Thanks, David. Claire, you need to unmute.
Thank you. Well, in addition to the Liberals and Conservatives who are saying they'd scrap business rates, of course we'd scrap business rates in Wales, but we'd also release small businesses and self-employed from paying corporation tax. And we'd raise an internet tax at the first point of sale. So that would encourage people to come back into the high street. It would boost them to want to come back into the high street. We'd also provide free parking for 2 hours in town centres to encourage people to come and shop. And as I mentioned before, this idea of a business hub in Clwyd Peffler would bring more people into the community, and they'd be sort of wanting to go out and use the local cafes and shops at lunchtime. And if there continue to be empty buildings, you could consider, well, how do we use those? You have to do it in a strategic way, but maybe some of them could be created into flats because there's a lack of affordable housing in the area. Obviously, there'd be investment in boosting the tourism to really bring people back into Colwyn Bay, into the town. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Claire. Brilliant.
Yeah. So, I hear a lot about, more grants, more funding and all that. And, in itself, that won't be enough. We need to inspire people. We need to motivate people to be able to start their own business and try new things. I mean, I can only speak from experience as a young man who lost his job in a factory, young family, and then didn't know what I was going to do, unemployed. And then I started my own business, and now I've been running my own business for 6 years. It's possible people can, be independent, so to say, in creating their own wealth. Yeah, and with communities, we've got a lot of empty shops in Colwyn Bay and locations. We need to incentivize people to be able to afford premises to start their own business. So, I want to look at it from a different angle, not necessarily, there's been cuts with this, or we need more budget, we need more assistance. Well, what can we do ourselves? I think this is the problem, isn't it? We always want somebody to help us, but the only people who are going to help us is us alone. So, this is, with GLAD, we would be more into people taking their own initiative, getting things going. And of course, people will need help. Yes, it will be hard. Life is hard, but it's possible. So I would be looking at the situation from that type of standpoint of encouraging people, make it, business rates low so people can internet cheap for people to use so they can generate their own wealth.
Great. Thanks to all the candidates for your contributions there. We've reached 7 o'clock. I hope people don't mind if we run over just by 10 minutes or so. Some good comments in the chat box, which I'll refer you to. I won't read them out. You can read them for yourselves. This is the part of the evening where I ask each of the candidates, this is like the speed dating part, where you have 1 minute to set yourselves apart from the other parties and just to summarise your position. So we won't, without further ado, with 1 minute each. Gwen, I know, will be absolutely brutal on the timekeeping. But we'll start, we'll follow the same order. So, Darren, please start us.
Thanks ever so much, Vin, and Gwen, and Georgia, and everybody else who's been involved in organising this evening. I think it's been a great opportunity for us to get together and for us to have these robust exchanges, which are at the heart of every vibrant democracy. As far as I'm concerned, next week is a very important day for Wales. We'll be going to the polls to elect a brand new Senedd. You've seen the Labour Party in government for the past 20 odd years. They've been joined by the Liberal Democrats over the past 5 years. They were joined by Plaid Cymru in the past as well. And they've failed to solve many of the problems that we have discussed. That's why I think it's time for a new government in Wales, a government that cares for North Wales in a way that the current government and previous administrations haven't. And that's why I think everybody should vote for the Welsh Conservatives on Thursday of next week. And as I said at the start, it's been a privilege to serve this community of Colwyn Bay and other parts of the Clwyd West constituency for the past 14 years. And you can be sure that I'll continue to fight hard for you if I am re-elected next week. God bless you. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. We're just going to keep rolling. Josh.
Can I just check if I give people a warning at halfway? Does that work for everybody still? Okay.
Power mad, Gwen. Power mad. Okay, Josh.
Yeah, thank you. So, Darren Miller said that Labour has failed in the last 20 years over the issues we've discussed tonight. Well, the issues we've discussed tonight have been local, so if there's been any failure, I'd be looking at my local representative. I'd like to start with a quote from the funding for Colwyn Bay manifesto that we were all sent by the Strong Welsh Communities. And that reads, poorer areas with greater community capacity and social infrastructure have better health and wellbeing outcomes, higher rates of employment and lower levels of child poverty. So we need to ensure that we have a Labour government that ensures that we do have the greater community capacity. Now, I want to see every community in Wales with the resources and influence it needs to build a community and develop its own social infrastructure. Only Welsh Labour will ensure that through our strength of our common endeavour, we will achieve more together than we would alone.
Thank you, Joshua. How many seconds was that, Gwen?
You're on mute, 49, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Ellen.
Okay, I'm an NHS clinical psychologist by trade, and I work with disabled children and children with autism and their families, and I've seen the effects of Tory austerity cuts from London and also the Welsh Labour government. Wales is more poor than it was 20 years ago, and it doesn't have to be like that. So I am urging you on May the 6th to vote for Plaid Cymru. We need to give people hope. We need to work together at grassroots level to change things properly for Wales. And I just wanted to end with a quote as well. We don't inherit the earth from our fathers. We borrow it from our children. So for the sake of our children, for the sake of the people in our communities, vote Plaid Cymru on May the 6th. Diolch yn fawr.
Can you hear me? Okay, I don't know whether everyone else froze or just me. So, thank you, Ellen. David, for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. We do, Ellen's quite right, we do need to think about our children here. We need to think about what they need. They need a world that is fit to live in. So as Welsh Liberal Democrats, we are pledging to invest £1 billion in tackling the climate emergency. We are not promising to argue endlessly between red and blue. We're not promising to drag up constitutional issue in terms of independence. We're promising to put 24/7 mental health care in place so people get the help they need when they need it. We're pledging to save local high streets by ending business rates, as we've discussed. We're pledging to put people and communities first as we recover from COVID in a sustainable way and stop this endless arguing about whose vision of the left and right is the best.
Thanks, David. Claire.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to bring in people together and I will work with you to rebuild your community. Our bold Reform UK economic plan and desire to bring decisions to the lowest possible level and work with people of Wales will actually help in this respect. And in Reform UK's contract with the people of Wales, we've said that we'll rebuild high streets, we'll rejuvenate activities, we'll provide affordable housing, we'll help kids leaving school know how to manage their money, we'll provide better rural transport and transport across Wales, and we'll provide a lot of support for mental health. So together we can actually build a strong community in Wales. And I think that you need reform to build communities now and for the future.
Thank you very much, Claire. And finally, Vivian.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you very much. And thanks for inviting me to participate in this debate. GLAD is committed. We believe Wales is a nation, and in order for a nation to be able to govern or to conduct its business, it needs to be able to function like a normal country. The fact of the matter is, all this poverty, all this difficulties facing Wales is due to the fact that we don't have full control of our destiny. So therefore, by vote, the most revolutionary thing you, the voter, can do on the May the 6th is vote for a party whose loyalty is for Wales, not the UK government, but Wales. In order for Wales to succeed, we believe that Wales is the greatest country in the world, and an individual can succeed, but at the present moment, because it's governed by another country, another government, we are considered the poorest nation within the UK. So therefore, for real change, not just in Colwyn Bay, but for the country, vote GLAD on May the 6th. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps we could do some virtual hand claps for all the candidates. I don't know if we can do that. So I think just to sum up, really, there's been a mix of national and local discussions and issues that raised there. Our concerns is very much about community and community development, and hopefully people might who we've not met before might want to take part and be part of the conversation and part of the discussion about community engagement and the sort of self-help issues that people have raised as well. George is putting in the chat some contact information. Thanks everyone for your contributions. I spotted a few platitudes and a few a little bit of waffling, but not much. So well done to everyone for that. I'll leave. It would have been nice to actually to delve even further into some of the issues, to ask follow-up questions, but this format doesn't always lend itself to that. I hope everyone's enjoyed the session. I'd like to thank Georgia and Kai on the technical side, Gwen for co-hosting as well, and all the candidates and everyone who's attended. Please stay in touch. Please get involved in your communities, and hopefully we'll do it again soon. And I hope people will share this experience. We've recorded the session, and we can send those files out, certainly to the candidates and anyone else who requests them. Gwen, do you want to say a final word? That's all.
Yeah, just to echo what Vin said, just diolch I pawb am eu cyfraniadau ac pawb am cael sgwrs defnyddiol iawn ac rhoi cyfle bob arall I siarad. Ac well done everybody. We managed it. Hey.
We just ran over by 10 minutes, so we didn't do too badly. Okay, so thanks to everybody and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Diolch, Georgia. Hwyl fawr.
Hello.
Thank you, everybody.